All right. Why did you go, Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's video. We've got a good one for you today. We've got 3 stories we're going to go over. Most of them are going to be focused on DMs. Let's jump right into the videos. Alrighty. Our first story is from user MilesSriracha18 and is titled DM on a Power Trip. This story isn't exactly a huge horror show, but I thought I'd share nonetheless. I have a great D&D group for which I typically DM. However, one of our players, let's call them Jay, has taken up DMing as well. They've been running great campaigns for a few years now, and I genuinely enjoy being part of them. They've just announced their next campaign, and naturally, everyone in the group is excited. We all get the lore document and other campaign stuff to read, and everyone gets to work on making their characters. So the setting for this campaign is essentially a giant dungeon. Everyone is trapped in a town at the bottom of the dungeon, and no one has ever been to any of the higher levels save for the one above the town. Seeing that the setting is a huge dungeon, I float an idea to Jay about playing a character who studies the traps in the dungeon. One guy wants to play a wizard who wants to go into the dungeon to be a hero. Another one wants to play a cleric who tends to the graves of the town. Simple ideas, but relatively normal in concept. Not to Jay. Jay sends each of us individually a personalized tirade about how no one has done anything that can even remotely work and no one understands their setting. They're the DM, so they can deny ideas, sure, but it was a bit harsh. For me, all of these sound like concepts that can be made to work. Perhaps the DM wanted them to specifically be adventurers looking to scale out of the dungeon more organically. But if that's the case, the DM needs to let the players know, hey, your PCs need a very direct reason to be adventuring through the dungeon so that the town is no longer trapped or something like that. You gotta work with your players. You have to explain it if they're not getting the concept or they're not working it to work in a way that meshes. Ooh, my hand's all over the place there. That meshes well with the setting you have. Let's keep the story going though. So now everyone gets to making new characters. This time I decide to make a character inspired by Orpheus, except going up into a dungeon rather than down into the underworld. Others make their own ideas, all of which seem to work well to my understanding. Once again, everyone is lambasted, called too stupid to make a character that fits the setting, and all sorts of things like that. Then Jay starts to go off in the campaign server about how no one understands their stories, saying that they make too high concept of games for us to even comprehend. The lore doc is taken down as they plan to rewrite it to remove any chance for confusion. Maybe it's just me, but it feels like the DM is on some kind of power trip, saying everyone is an idiot compared to their narrative genius. Also, not to be petty, but their campaigns have been about going to an adventuring academy and being part of a thieves guild before this. Fun games, but not exactly groundbreaking concepts that only a true genius could understand. TLDR, DM goes on a power trip saying all their players are too stupid to understand a simplistic campaign concept. Okay, this DM is one of two things. One, they're either going on a power trip thinking they're a narrative genius is so much grandeur than that of their players, or two, they are thinking mainly that their characters aren't matching the vibe or story they want to go with. I'm a bit shocked the DM has suddenly turned like this into this asshole. Normally you can see a power trip coming from a really long way off. My hope is that there's just some grand miscommunication here, that the DM just hasn't communicated their tone or plan for the campaign to their players more effectively. As a DM, never think you're some better writer than your players. Part of the experience at the table and of ttrpgs in general is and should always be collaborative storytelling. I always love coming up personally with a plan or base story and then getting to watch my players shape and change the world as they play and kind of bounce off of each other. Hopefully, this DM gets their head out of their ass so that their ego doesn't end up ruining the table and potential friendships they have here. But I'm not sure if that's going to happen here. Maybe they think they're Matt Mercer. I don't think that's the case, but I do think they're going on a power trip here. Or, again, mass miscommunication. Ugh, okay. Whoa. That zoomed in super close. Hi, guys. This is where I put an ad if I had an ad, but I don't really do ads. My channel's not monetized yet. I don't have enough, subscribers and whatnot. But I do want to remind you guys that I do stream on Twitch generally during the weekend, usually on the weekends. It's normally like 7 p.m. Central Time to like 10 p.m. Central Time. I don't switch time zones somehow. And if you guys want to hang out, that would be awesome. I would love it. I would love to get to spend some time with you guys. You can chit chat about ttrpgs or video games. I play a ton of different games. We just finished up Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Gosh, the story was super, super good. But yeah, I just wanted to put that in here real quick. If you guys are super interested, please follow me on Twitch. There's links in the description below. Other than that, though, let's jump into that next story. Righty, our next story is from Python Mom, titled DM is Wrong About Rules and Railroads Everything. Help? Not sure if this should count as a true horror story, if I just need to vent. Also kind of need advice. TLDR, new DM doesn't know what he's doing and contradicts me, a seasoned DM who has read all the rules thoroughly. How do I teach him? For a bit of context, I have been playing D&D for over a decade and been DMing regularly for the past 2 years in a long campaign. I've read the books a few times and I know the rules relatively well. Well, I recently got in touch with an old friend, we'll call her B, and she said she plays D&D now. I was super excited and really wanted to play with her. So I met her group, which were her roommates, and they were all super cool and welcoming. Fast forward to me and my boyfriend playing with them. I was under the impression it was only going to be us, DM, me, my boyfriend, B, and the 2 other roommates. So right off the bat, I was a tiny bit put off when 3 other players showed up to the first session. They were all really nice people and I have nothing against them. It was just a much bigger group than I was expecting or ever had. I was also kind of put off by the DM, not as a person, just his style. There wasn't really a session 0 and I was given no context as to what the campaign would be. I asked, trust me. So I just went with a comfort class, Druid. Basically, the entire first session was everyone remaking their characters since they had used these characters before, but were now going back to level 1. This is where my frustration started. No one knew what the hell they were doing. This is relevant, I promise. Okay, a new DM and a ton of players is a recipe for disaster. I highly recommend new DMs only DM for about 3 to 5 players max. DMing for the first few times can be super hectic in and of itself, and tables of 5 or more tend to be very busy. Busy is a really good word. Also, always have a session 0 to at least go over the main theme of the campaign, the do's and don'ts, and what classes, spells, feats, etc. are going to be allowed. You don't have to necessarily build the characters in session 0, but you need to at least get everyone together so they have an idea of what they're getting into, who's going to be there, and what will be allowed. Let's keep the story going though. Every one of them was new to the game, even though they have played before. They used D&D Beyond, which is fine, but I think it made it harder for them to learn how to properly make a character or learn the rules of the game. The DM very much encouraged D&D Beyond, but my boyfriend and I were used to physical stuff, which the DM said he was okay with. We all rolled our stats together and everything was fine. The real of what I need help with is talking to the DM. It seems to me like we are playing some kind of module here, which is fine, except that everything is on very strict rails. Our creativity with situations isn't rewarded, and some people's really cool ideas just don't pan out in any way. Regardless of their role, because it's not what the DM wants. Of their role, because it's not what the DM wants. To me, this feels like a very rigid playstyle and is not my favorite. He also feels like a DM who's against the players. Okay, so it kind of sounds like there was a session 0, but it was like technically the first session. If they're all making their characters, like you don't have to make all your characters in session 0. But it sounds like they didn't go over do's and don'ts and themes essentially. Now on to what this DM is. Some DMs are very rigid with their play style. Often some people think this is railroading, or they see it as railroading, which could be good or bad depending on your personal play style as a player. It just sounds like OP just isn't fitting here with the DM. Now, a DM that's being combative or very, against the players is a recipe for a bad time. TTRPGs should not be seen as competitive, i.e. players versus DM. That creates a very competitive atmosphere, which can cause players to get mad at the DM when the DM ends up ultimately creating a deadly encounter, because they want to win because it's competitive. Or the opposite of that, the DM's getting very angry with their players because he put them in a really difficult situation and they somehow wriggled their way out of that tough patch and he's now lost. Communicating with newer DMs can also be really difficult. There's a chance potentially that these new, like, weird off-the-cuff ideas aren't panning out because this person doesn't know how to handle it. Learning how to improvise on the fly and kind of meld in ideas and make them layered and work properly when you first start DMing is super duper difficult. It just takes time. There's no real way to, like, teach that ahead of time. Like, you kind of just have to learn it on the go. Let's keep the story going, though. We have only played 3 sessions, for the most recent of which was the 3rd, and in that session we were tasked with defending a fortress from dragon cultists and a literal blue dragon. We're level 3. This was an adult blue dragon. I don't know if he expected us to kill it or what, but we were trying to protect the villagers and came up with a good plan for them to fortify the keep, or at least block the doors so that enemies couldn't get in, or tell them to take the tunnels out of town and into the woods where they would be safer. None of that happened. The DM basically said, nothing you say is going to make them leave, and it's your responsibility to deal with this threat. None of the supposedly strong NPCs did anything. There were soldiers who were up on the walls of the keep, but they did nothing but die to the dragon's breath weapon, which changed from being fire to then ice, but blue dragons have a lightning breath weapon. We also had zero reason to be here helping these people. We were all just passing through and didn't want to fight a dragon. Also, in this 3rd session, the 3 unexpected players weren't able to make it, and so the DM had their characters do literally nothing. Okay, it sounds like this DM is being inflexible. I can understand maybe setting this blue dragon up as a sort of BBEG of sorts, so tossing it at your players isn't necessarily a horrible idea. Do keep in mind, though, you need to make sure your players are aware that they can run, because this can cause players to kind of bash their head at the problem until they all die because they think, I have to fight this until it dies. The villagers should be trying to escape if the players are pushing them enough to do it. This is where this DM's inflexibility is coming into play super hard here, where they're not incorporating the ideas that the players are giving them into the story and allowing them to interact with the world to push the story forward in whatever way possible. This DM is very heavily trying to railroad, it sounds like, and the players just aren't either getting it or they're not explaining it, it's that latter one, how to get that story pushed on forward. The changing breath weapon could potentially be a cool mechanic here, not the DM just making mistakes. Perhaps this dragon is stealing other dragons' powers, or some bullshit. I'm kind of spitballing here. Each time we leveled up, we would roll our health before ending the session. Everyone else used D&D Beyond took the standard for their respective classes, but my boyfriend and I like to roll for randomness. I got really good rolls, so my druid had 28 HP, the same as our fighter, and this seemed to upset the DM. During the last session, there was some giant lizard thing that attacked my character and brought her down to 10 HP. The DM was surprised and annoyed that I had that much health. It seemed like he wanted to kill my character and didn't want me doing certain things or tried to nerf me a few times. I was a wildfire druid, so I had a little wildfire spirit, and he seemed to think that it should require concentration. So in the fight, I had a flaming sphere out and then summoned my spirit. He was like, okay, so you stop concentrating on the sphere. And I said, no, that's not how that works. He said it didn't make sense to him, but whatever. Then, after the fight, meaning the dragon flew away, it dropped a scale after we did some damage to it. I really wanted the scale and rolled good perception to see where it landed. I then said, okay, I'm going to wild shape into a panther to climb over this wall. And the DM goes, you can't turn into a panther, to which I was like, what? I had the pages open where it said on wild shape list, I could turn into a CR 1/4 or below, and the panther's a CR 1/4. He apparently didn't believe me, even though I had the books open right in front of him and he had to look it up. If the DM does not like players potentially having more health than they think they should, then let your players know that they will be taking the standard or average for their class and don't let them roll. Hopefully OP and their boyfriend here in this situation were being like, well, we're going to roll, screw you. Doesn't sound like it, but this DM is coming off as super combative. Either because they do not know the rules and are afraid they won't be taken seriously, or they seriously believe they know the rules and are just fucking stubborn. You as the DM will, and I can tell you this for a fact, you will forget the rules or how classes work, and that's okay. You're only human. A good table will have a comfortable back and forth between you and your players, where they may correct or remind you of things if you got wrong. And if a player reminds you of how their class works, Feel free to check yourself because sometimes the wording's weird, and so it does pay to double check, but you should never be combative about it. Good players will be coming at it from a place of fairness and being friendly, not to prove you wrong. I always let my players know that I will not and do not know all the rules, so I will make mistakes. We all will. We're human, and that's okay. Continuing the story, I wanted to use the scale to turn it into a shield since I was a gnome and small enough to use this big scale as a shield. And he argued that point too. As a druid, I can't use metal armor or shield, so I thought the scale was perfect. But after hearing that, the DM said that the scale is kind of like metal. And again, I'm confused because no? I had to explain to him that the reason druids don't use metal is because it's an industrial construct and they prefer natural things like wood and leather. This is a dragon scale, which is a natural thing that came from a living creature. He eventually conceded, but I have to find someone to make it into a shield for me. It just felt like he wanted to contradict me at every turn. Same with the other players, but they are new and don't know the rules as well as I do, so they weren't able to speak up about it. My friend B is a peace domain cleric and wanted to use her balm of peace to get away from something at one point, which she could have made it to me and healed me since I would be dead after one more bite from the giant lizard. She had already used her movement for the round, so I thought the Channel Divinity Balm of Peace was perfect. The DM argued that Balm of Peace did not give extra movement, which was just incorrect, but frankly, I was tired of correcting him at this point. This might not be the table for OP. The DM is being clearly combative and won't take corrections to heart. Perhaps the DM thinks OP's being a bit of a rules lawyer here, but personally, if you're approaching it calmly, you shouldn't come across as a rules lawyer. I can understand the DM making the player want to do some work to turn the dragon scale into a proper shield. One, it's kind of a fun builder for the character. They get to like influence and build something in the world. They have to interact with some NPCs to kind of get this thing properly made into a usable shield. It's a fun little reward for their creative thinking. But they're being very combative, the DM is here, about this entire thing. When you drop things from powerful creatures or creatures in general, don't be surprised when your players are showing their creativity and try to utilize those things. Other rules he got wrong. He thinks concentration checks are not constitution saving throws. He doesn't seem to understand the rogue's cunning action or know what hidden means. He makes everything a skill check, like rolling perception when something is clearly in front of them. Or the 20 strength Goliath fighter needed to make a check to lift a wooden table. Didn't know or remember or care that difficult terrain meant half the speed for enemies. Didn't know to add proficiency bonus to weapon attacks. So in all, I'm looking for advice on how to talk to the DM and politely explain all the rules he gets wrong. He acts like a but really is confidently incorrect about a lot of things. See the list above. This affects the other players as well, since they are new and look to him for answers or just use D&D Beyond. He doesn't explain anything and he just says yes or no, you can't do that. So they're not learning the rules at all. Since everyone else is new to the game, how do I and my boyfriend, as seasoned players who know all the rules, help them all without feeling like we're attacking the DM? I just want to touch on something real quick. It seems like OP here's been mentioning D&D Beyond a lot and about how it stops players from learning the game. Maybe this is what they mean, maybe they don't. I personally don't agree with the idea, not to say OP here is saying this specifically, but the idea that if you utilize D&D Beyond, you can't learn the game or it makes it more difficult. I can kind of understand how digitizing things can make it take maybe a little bit longer for players to learn how the game works because it gamifies a lot of the game for you. And what gamify mean makes it more like video game-esque, you know, where you press a button to remove health and all that. As for speaking with the DM, you could always approach them and ask them how their first time DMing's going and ask if they need any help. If comfortable, you could note that they seem to be misinterpreting rules, which is understandable given the amount of things on their plate, and always stress that. You'd be like, hey, you seem to have a lot on your plate and you seem to be maybe misremembering some rules, or how, if you're comfortable enough, also bring up how they seem to be very competitive with against the players. Given how this DM is, though, I don't think they'll take this advice to heart and will instead see it as a direct attack on them. They could likely see anyone trying to talk to them as an attack. This may end up being an instance where they need to just leave the table politely if they don't want to play a game where the rules vary quite differently from raw or rules as written. If they ask their friend to leave as well, perhaps it would be a wake-up call to the other players or DM if multiple players, especially veteran players, leave citing they don't like the inconsistency with the rules and how combative the DM is. I personally don't have faith this DM will take any of this advice to heart, though. Sometimes these things just take time for people to figure out or require them to watch the entire table they were working at and DMing for fall apart to recognize that maybe, hey, I fucked up. This is gonna be a really weird one to film from. Hopefully nobody takes this as sexual. Okay, we got one more story, and hopefully this doesn't crash before we're done here. You can see my thigh. Look at my... Alrighty, our last story is from user TrickAd6313 titled, I Made a Veteran Rage Quit. Honestly, this isn't the worst story out there, but it definitely made an impact on me. For some context, my friend introduced me to D&D, and I became a regular for it. I played in his campaign for years, still do, but he inspired me to try and DM myself. I've had one of those D&D starter kits, so I used that and made a few alterations when necessary. Then I started up the campaign with 4 other people, 3 friends, and the veteran of the story, who I'll call T. Alright, quick sidebar. I actually started D&D once with a starter kit. This was back in 3.5/4th edition, which was many moons ago, so I'm definitely dating myself a little bit here. Starter kits are really, really nice. Don't ever prejudge people for using them. They include pre-made characters, a small planned adventure usually, has some dice, very basic paper tokens, maybe a battle map or something. Basically the kind of stuff you need to get a first session going and allow you to taste the game for what it is. They're fun. I highly recommend them if you're trying to get into D&D but don't want to dump a bunch of money on a $50 player's handbook, the monster manual, the DM's guide, and all that stuff. I was super excited for it. I made a notebook, added some quests of my own, changed things here and there to make it more personal. You know the drill. My friends loved it. In the first session, there was a team wipeout. It was honestly really funny because there's one of those big goblin fellows hiding behind some boxes that end up startling them. At first, I thought I'd messed up when they all died, and I was apologetic and asked if they wanted to try again with something different in the next session. They were all laughing and having fun of it, telling me it was fine, and they'd let me choose for the next session, which is section 2. So I decided to make it so that they actually hadn't died, but had been looted and tied up outside of the cave. They were able to escape and make it back to the caravan they'd been escorting before they run in with the goblin cave. And this is where the end started. T asked if there was any loot in the caravan. I looked at my notes and said no, that it was just full of pickaxes and alcohol and stuff. He asked if there was any armor or weapons, and I again reiterated what I'd said above. He said, yeah, fuck that shit, and left without another word. This happened at the very start of the session. Their loot was in the first section of the goblin cave where they're perfectly capable of sneaking to. My friends didn't mind, they still enjoyed it and kept giving me pointers throughout the rest of the session. They said they enjoyed it. My DM friend, the one who got me into it, was extremely angry with T and went off on him in DMs. That's kind of weird. Maybe T took it personally that their weapons and armor were taken. Some people don't like to be defeated. You would think a veteran player would give some grace to a first-time DM. Plus, the whole defeated but captured is a very common trope. You know, either like your party wakes up in chains, like the beginning of Skyrim, or you get your ass beat by the first big enemy you fight, and now you have to escape their encampment. It's a reoccurring theme in a lot of campaigns. It's a little weird that T here's being a bit of a dick, and I do applaud the friend who got them into DMing for standing up for them in the DMs and talking them down. T needs to get his shit straight. Honestly, though, it made me lose motivation for running campaigns. I just felt bad. And I thought I was adding a little extra challenge that they'd enjoy since they were all longtime players. I purposefully failed rolls even if the dice didn't to give them edges. If I thought they were struggling too much, add an extra monster for them because they like to fight. Tried adding some side quest variety so they didn't, have to be linear. So yeah, not a terrible horror story, but I still think back on it sometimes. Hopefully this motivation loss wasn't permanent for OP here. Don't let a bad egg ruin DMing for you. You won't be able to please everybody, and T kind of seems like a jerk. If you aren't enjoying a session or campaign and want to give constructive criticism, highly recommend you do it privately with the DM. Don't just say, yeah, fuck this, and walk out, especially when there's something that's clearly built to push the story along. If OP here was being an asshole, constantly fighting with their players about things, or was just doing weird sketchy shit like forcing characters to participate in themes they didn't necessarily agree to, i.e. sexual themes, there really isn't too big a reason to just get up and walk out. Hopefully, though, this isn't permanent. we've all been there. You run into a bad player, gets pissy and leaves. It happens sometimes. Alrighty, guys. Thank you all for hanging out. I hope you enjoyed the stories we had here today. I certainly enjoyed getting to talk about them. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. If you're enjoying, do subscribe, that way you can come back and this will pop up in your beautiful inbox. So please do that. Other than that, if you did enjoy everything, you do want to get to hang out sometimes at night, I do stream on Twitch once again. Links down in the description. Thank you guys all for hanging out and watching the video. I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye, everybody. Keep in mind, though, as a DM, you need to make sure your players are aware that they can run if you're going to put them up against something. Is my character model jumping up and down constantly? Oh my God, it is. Oh, I hope I didn't have that happen while we were talking. That would be awkward. Oh my God. Hold on. Oh God. I'm in the water now.